Yo, what's up everybody? It's Drewberry back with Snap or Pass, and this time we're talking about the next card joining Marvel Snap, and that is Corvus Glaive, a 3/5 on reveal. Discard 2 cards from your hand to get +1 max energy. Now we've kind of seen cards in the past that have been in Marvel Snap that have similar effects, and we're going to get to that in a bit while we get to the mechanics, counters, and some deck lists that I brewed up for you here today. But first, we got to talk about the spotlight caches. So the other cards that you can open up if you choose to open up a spotlight cache during this week is going to be X-23 and Gladiator, which I think is a pretty high value spotlight week. X-23 is like a pretty staple card, I think, in destroy lists. And Gladiator, man, this card has really crept up in usage as well as just overall win rate and stuff. I mean, it's a 3/8 with a maybe good upside ability. Yeah, I think he's actually a pretty sick card. I don't own Gladiator, so I'm especially excited for this. I chose to pass on him when he was a 3/7 way back and haven't used the tokens to pick him up since. So that's a bonus for me. And I think a lot of people are probably going to be in that same situation because they're both Series 5 cards. And Corvus is a Series 5 card. So that's like triple Series 5. That always tends to generate some good value. So I think this is a pretty juicy week to open up. But let's talk about the new card, Corvus Glaive. All right, so the mechanics for Corvus Glaive. I think the most important thing to learn about this card is that 2 cards must be discarded to get that bonus energy. So if you only have 1 card in hand, you play Corvus, it's going to discard that card, but you're not going to get that payoff being that max energy increase. So you want to make sure that you have 2 cards in your hand. But another interesting mechanic is that the discarding is going to happen one after the other. Now, one little like hidden secret about discard, and you've probably interacted with it many times, but just to clarify how it works, is it does pick 2 cards. It looks at your hand and it's going to say Corvus is discarding 2. I'm going to pick 2 cards to discard, but it's going to happen one after the other. And this has a few implications. The most prominent one that comes to mind is Black Knight. When Black Knight's on the board, he's looking for a card to be discarded and he's going to generate an Ebony Blade, but he's only looking for that first one that's discarded. So that's why there has to be 1 discard and then another discard, not 2 at the exact same time. Okay, so this is not 2 at once. This is just 1 at a time. And then with APOC and Swarm, right? Pretty good synergies with Corvus here. Not actually all that crazy great, because what's going to happen is if APOC's the only card in your hand, well, it would discard APOC once. That's it. You're not getting that second discard of APOC because, once again, when Corvus reveals, he's looking at your hand and saying, these are the 2 I'm going to discard. But in that case, he only saw APOC. He clicked APOC, he discarded it, and he had no idea that APOC was going to respawn back into your hand with that extra power. And the same goes with Swarm. You discard Swarm, even though you've gotten 2 new copies into your hand, it was already programmed and decided at the point of the reveal of Corvus that it would discard just that 1 Swarm. These copies were not an option. And lastly, when it comes to the mechanics that I could kind of think about, and again, if you have a question, let me know in the comments, is that multiple triggers are going to result in multiple energy bonuses. So what I'm thinking is you use Wong and you discard a whole bunch of cards in your hand. Now, provided you'd have to have 4 cards at the point of that reveal happening with Corvus, but if you did, that's a way to get +2 max energy. Or maybe we use Grandmaster later on and you move them over and you do it again, you get 2 more discards and you get more energy. Why not? Scale up like crazy. Maybe if you happen to trigger this a couple of times by turn 6, you got like 3 energy more than your opponent. That's going to be a pretty significant advantage, but you just might not have cards in hand to actually make use of that energy. And that is where a lot of folks are going, I don't think this card's going to be all that great. Because let's think about it, right? A card that works into the strategy of an archetype, gives max energy, and has a premium stat line. Isn't that kind of crazy? I would look at X-23 to be like almost the most comparable card to Corvus in a roundabout way, because you're getting energy working into a strategy and a decent stat line. But Corvus just seems like he should be broken. But the problem is that discard has never really needed max energy or energy gain in general. So it's just kind of made use of what it's got because you're discarding a lot of stuff. It ends up kind of free. And then you're Dracula with your APOC, and then that's kind of it. You play out your Swarms, which are already free. But you know what? I'm thinking that the best part about Corvus is actually that he's just a cheap double discard. Honestly, I don't think I really care about the max energy. It's not a bad thing to have. It's actually always nice to have, because if that, dream dimension pops up on turn 5, or there's just some wacky scenario where I'm like, I just wish I had that one extra energy to play a few more cards. Maybe it's to make sure that APOC is the only card in my hand so that I can actively discard him, focus him, or swarms, or whatever I need to focus discard. So I like the max energy as a payoff, a nice payoff to the ability. But what I really like most is just having a 3/5 body that discards 2 cards for me. Like, if you play discard, you know that the more you can discard, the more value you're going to generate. Yeah, there may come a point where you have too many of those cards in your hand, and then you're just not really generating value because all you're doing is discarding the discard activators. But I think more options is better, even if there are some comparable options to Corvus, which we're going to get to in a little bit here. Another thing is about energy gain. So I was trying to look through some counters for Corvus, and I wasn't coming up with a whole lot. And it made me realize we have Mobius to counter discounts in the hand, energy cheat. But when there's energy gain, bonus energy, like through Electro, Corvus, even like Psylocke, or just anything giving energy on the next turn, there's no counter. There's no way of like, oh, if they have more energy than me, this card gets X amount of power or something like that. Maybe something for the custom card folk, but it's an interesting little thought here that there's no direct counter to energy surplus. At least that I could think of anyways. Maybe you guys got one in the comments. And then some cons when it comes to this card. I don't think there's a whole lot, but the biggest and most glaring one that's really going to make or break this card is that it's random, right? So there's a reason that Hellcow doesn't get played a whole lot despite having a great stat line. That's because you might discard the cards that you want to play. Some of the best discard cards are Lady Sif, Colleen Wing, and Blade. Why? Because those 3 are targeted discard. You have control over what's going to be discarded when you play them in most instances. So with Corvus, you're just saying, man, I really hope you don't discard my Hela. Discard anything else, just not my Hela. And then every now and then, what's he going to discard? It's going to be Hela. If anything, it's almost always going to be Hela. So yeah, that's going to be the problem with Corvus, is that it's just a little bit of randomness is going to sabotage your match. And on top of that, discard is a very tight archetype. There's already a lot of cards, and it's tough to like stuff them all together in a cohesive deck. And I think Corvus could be easily replaced. So when you're looking at a Series 5 card that costs 6,000 tokens, in my eyes, you kind of want it to be not necessarily just something that you can deck build around, but that is going to have a home and warrant a position in your deck. And Corvus could just be a card that could be replaced, even if it's slightly worse. But it could still be replaced and you save yourself 6,000 tokens or some spotlight caches, which, isn't easy to come around to. So that's where I'm like, I just don't know about this guy. But really quickly, I've been hinting at it. Let's talk about the power creep in Marvel Snap and what Corvus matches up to. So there's actually 2 cards I think that stand out as close comparisons for Corvus. But to me, I think the most glaring one is Hellcow. Why? Because Hellcow has a better stat line and can essentially, in the right conditions, be played for the same cost. What I mean is you have Zabu out on the board, which is typically run with Hellcow because there's Dracula and all these other sorts of good things, and you can make him a 3/8. So Hellcow actually wins in the stat line category, and they both provide the same amount of discard, and with an honor reveal. The upside for Corvus is that he can give you that plus min max energy should you actually discard 2 cards. So I don't know which one I love or which one I would prefer in my deck. I think in most cases I will put Corvus in the deck because it doesn't rely on having Zabu out on the board to make a 3/8 Hellcow, which I kind of like that a little bit better, and the max energy upside, of course. But if you choose to pass on Corvus, man, honestly, look at all those creators, Decklists, and everything, and just put Hellcow in there instead. And it's probably going to come out to a similar result. Now, there will be the odd time that the max energy is crucial. There's some decks, a couple of decks that I have to show you guys later on that makes great use of the max energy. So maybe not 100% switchable, but then we could also look at Electro, the other card I was hinting at. Electro gives you that +1 max energy, except now you can't play multiple cards in a turn, but usually in Electro lists, that's what you build to do anyways. You're just looking to ramp up into those 6 costs, so you're only playing 1 a turn anyhow. and he's a 3-2 compared to a 3-5. So I personally believe that Corvus has a home in Marvel Snap, that he does not step on the toes of Hellcow or Electro too much, and that it's a perfectly fine card to have in Marvel Snap. And with the question being, is this power creep? My answer is I do not believe this is an instance of power creep. Let's talk about the counters. Man, I had a hard time. These are trash. I'm not gonna lie. I apologize. I tried to get 6 counters out there every time. I really only see one, and that's Cosmo. Cosmo stops the on reveal, and then you don't get the discard, and then you don't get the energy. But then the other thing about that is they're still left with a 3-5, which is great. So it's like a counter, but still not too bad. And then I was thinking maybe stature, because then they don't have to make you discard to get stature discounted. You do it to yourself, but you're a discarded list anyway, so you're gonna do that anyways. I was like, I'm trying here. And then Leech, I don't even know, dude. I was thinking basically with Leech is that you're trying to ramp up into these 6 costs, and by the turn 6 comes around, you wanted to play a bunch of cards and it gets leeched, or maybe you want to discard your APOC more, but you can't because he's been leeched. Anything like that. Does, you know, you got Dracula on the board, you want to discard an APOC bunch. I don't know. It's not that great of a counter. Dr. Octopus pulling out Corvus so that maybe there's so many cards pulled out that you can't actually like control where Corvus or when he's going to be played, and if you're going to get that max energy or not, because you don't have 2 cards in your hand. Maybe Magneto, he's a 3 cost. It moves Corvus around. I don't know. That doesn't seem so bad. And then I got Hela here, and you're probably thinking, Drew, what the hell why do you got Hela here? That makes no sense. You want to use Hela with Corvus, and you're right. You're right. But the reason I have Hela here is because I guarantee everybody's going to discard Hela from a Corvus play. It's going to feel bad. It's going to happen a lot. It's going to happen to me all the time. If you're playing Hela, it happens already. It's going to happen even more. So there you go. It's going to be great. Maybe you shouldn't play Corvus when you got Hela in hand, but we're all going to do it anyways. Guarantee it. We're going to do it. It's going to be great. So there you go. Those are the counters. I don't know. It's pretty trash. I'm sorry. So on top of not having a whole lot of counters, I don't have a whole lot of datamine combos. They've been really tight with the datamines. I might omit this section entirely from Snapper Pass. I'm still not sure. Just because datamines, we're not getting as much as we used to. And as more cards are being released, we really just have information on the next 2 months. So maybe I'll just keep it to like any cards that are actually relevant. But there is one very relevant card, so much so that it's being released next week, and that is Proxima Midnight. A 4/7, when this is discarded, jumps to your lowest power location that isn't full. The wife of Corvus, the two are married, as Ben Brode noted in the announcement video. But anyhow, obviously great, right? We discard Proxima with Corvus. Not only are we having the upside of getting that max energy, but also we get a free 7 power card on the board. That is 3 energy, discard 2 cards, get +1 max energy, and 7, no, not even just 7. It would be 12 power total between the 2 cards on the board. Fantastic combination, of course. The other card I was thinking of is this one right here. It doesn't even have a name, but Datamine is Night Nurse. I don't think we're ever going to see this card actually join Marvel Snap, but she has been Datamine for a very long time. 2/2 on reveal, add all cards you discarded or destroyed last turn to your hand. I actually really like that ability. That'd be a lot of fun, trying to discard a bunch of cards and then add them back to your hand. It's kind of like a failsafe. If you do discard that Hela or anything like that, then you play the Night Nurse, you get it back into your hand. It would be pretty sweet, and it has destroy upside as well. So obviously Proxima is like the #1, right? And I'm going to be talking about her next week, so I'm not going to have her in any of the deck lists today. You're going to just have to tune in on the Snapper Pass for Proxima Midnight when we talk more about Corvus and Proxima synergies, key synergies, and deck lists. So key synergies, man, I'm just thinking about stuff that we can discard, and it's going to be great, so that at least when we discard cards, there is no downside. It's going to be just all upside. We get the discard procs, we get the max energy, and we get the powerful Corvus Glaive on the board. It's just a win-win-win, and that's going to be great. So the cards like Swarm, APOC, Helicarrier, filling our stuff with a bunch of stuff. X-23 or Wolverine are a couple of other examples. Even if we can't discard these cards twice, it's fine. You discard them once, it's good enough value. You do that a lot anyways. You play Lady Sif as a 3/5, you're only discarding 1 card. It's probably going to be APOC every time, but if APOC's the only card in our hand when we play Corvus, yeah, we don't get that max energy or whatever, but it's essentially like another Lady Sif. And one thing I've noticed in Marvel Snap is that some redundancy in deck lists is relevant and is actually very strong. It boosts the draw of your deck and just the overall consistency game after game. And then the other ones are the ones that benefit from cards being discarded, like Morbius and Meek. They're going to get a bunch of power every time we discard cards, and Corvus is going to do 2 discards, which is going to be fantastic. That's plus 4 power for Morbius and 2 for Meek, which is just great, especially since we can play them before we end up playing Corvus. So that brings us to our first deck list. And basically what I've done here is I've taken just a staple classic discard list that is proven to be decent time after time after time. Used to be better when America Chavez was her old self, but it's still pretty good. And it's this one right here on the far left. The idea being we want to leave APOC in the hand for Dracula. We want to discard a bunch of swarms so that we play as many as we can on turn 6, and everything else is just aiming to discard our hand on repeat. So we got like Blade, Colleen Wing, Corvus, Lady Sif, all discard activators, Morbius and Meek being the beneficiaries from all of that discarding, and Dakin, actually, Dakin as well. Now, he is the one that I would replace with Proxima Midnight, who's coming out next week. And it's a little bit of an interesting scenario we got here, where 2 cards are releasing back-to-back that synergize very well with each other, and it makes it difficult to warrant getting one, but not the other. And yet they're both very expensive. So that's kind of an own challenge in its own right. But regardless, I think that deck list would do just great. I think it's going to do fantastic. I like to run Hellcow in these type of lists sometimes, just to get more discard in there. So I'm all for it. I think that'll be just fine. Another one that I'm cooking here that maybe is a little crazy. I'm using some weird cards, man, but I see potential. And that is Agent of Mischief, and this is a Loki deck with Corvus. And I know what you're thinking. Why are you running discard with Loki? The objective of a Loki deck is to have as many cards in your hand as possible, so that when you drop Loki, you get more back that have cheap cost, right? They're all deducted by 1. Well, I'm thinking, what if we hit that helicarrier? What if we add a bunch of stuff with Nick Fury? What if we get some ramp going so that when I do get those discounted cards, I have a surplus of energy to stack on top of that, so I can just play these no matter what. All your powerful stuff in your deck, I now get to play. I think it's actually going to be pretty legit, man. And I know another one that's weird is Collector, because Collector and Loki don't work together. But look at the other cards that we got here. Nick Fury, Helicarrier giving us a bunch of stuff. Swarms going back to the hand. Snowguard giving us 2. So I think there's just potential with Collector to get to decent power totals. We don't need him to get to those crazy 10 power levels. I'm talking like 5, 6, going to be good. Going to be just a good stat line, works with the deck. And then Corvus is going to give us max energy and some discarding, which is going to be great. And then the backup plan, if we don't go with the Loki play, well, now we have Devil Dino and Helicarrier to get a bunch of cards in our hand, Nick Fury. I actually really like the prospect of discarding 2 cards, getting that max energy, and then Nick Fury to give us 2 6-drops, which we can then play one of those on turn 5 and one of those on turn 6. Like, that's a nice little backup plan, just in case it comes to that point, you know? Corvus on 3, Nick Fury on 4, 6-drop, 6-drop. Could be fun. I don't know. Maybe you got to toss in Magic to really make things work here. That could be relevant. But I got Magic preserved for the last deck, and that is the Hella High Roll. Not much to talk about here, man. You could slice and dice it any way you want to. Some kind of shell of this. You could put the Living Tribunal package in with Onslaught, whatever you want to do. Yeah, Corvus is a pretty good card to be a backup option if you don't draw MODOK. That's really what this is all about, man. You play Invisible Woman, you play one of those discarding cards. Maybe you play Corvus without Invisible Woman, you discard 2 cards, and now you have that bonus energy so that you can play Giganto and then Hela afterwards. Or we just go into that Ghost Rider play. I could see this being pretty relevant. I think it works a lot in a Hela list. You just gotta watch out that you don't discard Hela, because that's always the problem. Anywho, that's the couple that I came up with, but I think there's a lot more. I only ever put 3 decks, but I think there's some more potential. You could even look at maybe some Surfer decks, because he's a 3-cost 3/5 and gives you plus energy for that final bell. That could be pretty relevant. You could look at just discarding a bunch of cards and then that Dracula Infinite strategy, right, where you play a bunch of cheap stuff and then you only got those 2. I don't know, dude. The sky's the limit with this type of card. Anytime there's max energy, it usually finds a way. There haven't been many cards that have fallen flat when they give you bonus max energy. So does that mean Corvus is going to be a snap or a pass? Overall, I'm saying this card is a pass, but every time we talk about pretty decent looking discard cards, it's hard for me to completely just pass on the card, because some people just play this game exclusively to play discard. I'm telling you, like, out of all the archetypes, I feel like there's some discard maniacs out there that just absolutely love it, and I'm here for it. I'm like close to being one. I really do like playing discard, but I can't just like say this is a must grab. right? This is a 6,000 token card. I think the spotlight caches are pretty relevant. If you're going to go for this card, I'd probably use spotlight caches. That seems like a strong opportunity. And I will also disclose that I will be picking up this card. I do plan on using my spotlight caches to get both Corvus and Gladiator. I'm missing both, so it's just a great week for me personally based on my collection. But if you're someone that's got all the cards, maybe you're not too interested in discard, then this one's a pass, because we know there's going to be some bangers in the next couple months. But then the other thing is, like, with Proxima coming out, like if you choose to get Proxima, which in my opinion seems like the stronger of the two of these cards, you might be missing out on Corvus and be sad that you didn't pick him up. So if you like playing discard, you're very interested, you have the available resources, I think it's worth going for this card. That's why I got the Wolverine there, little discard guy emote. But ultimately, for the general population, this is not a must buy. This is not a must snap. You could probably just look at a lot of those deck lists and replace Corvus with Hellcow, who's a Series 3 card that you probably already own. You're going to do just fine. That's my consensus when it comes to Corvus Glaive. He looks like a lot of fun, man. I'm excited to play with this card and play some discards. So anyways, thank you so much for watching, everybody. I will catch you guys next time.